So, a nice introduction about you, I'm sure. I mean, I'm much more familiar because I live in Columbus, Ohio. But I think it'd be great if you could talk about, because it is really interesting, if you could talk about your background a little bit. Like, how'd you get from Istanbul to Columbus, Ohio?
Well, thank you for having me. I didn't realize with all these lights in my face, I cannot see you, so I'm guessing you are here. Yes, I was born in Istanbul. I was educated in France. And in 1980, I came to the United States to start the American affiliate of a French company who specialized in precast concrete construction, modular construction. I did the market studies myself, and I selected Houston. So my first arrival to the US was to Houston, Texas. In the 1980s, that was the cowboy era. So very quickly, I adopted Texas. You know, I had my cowboy hat, my belt watched my boots, and I had the starched jeans, where you can see the crease. And, and I learned to dance, two steps, Cotton Eye Joe, and everything else. And like my wife would say, as long as you don't speak, you can pass for a Texan. So that's my Houston background. And then after Texas, I went to New York, Manhattan. I developed some residential in the suburbs. And then to Miami, where I developed Coco Walk, a project in Coconut Grove, which is, I think, an important project for leisure time anchored projects. And then because of that project, somehow Mr. Wexner figured me out and then asked me to develop Easton in Columbus. Initially, I was commuting between the two cities, and finally we decided to move to Columbus. We have 4 kids. The 2 were going to college, to kindergarten. So we said, well, why don't we raise them in Ohio? Best decision we made. So I'm very happy to be there. And
so your decision-making process kind of about Easton, like, what's the background on that? Because Easton isn't, I don't know if you guys know this, but if you haven't been to Easton, it's an exceptional shopping center. And at one point in time, Columbus had 7 or 8 shopping centers. We now have 2 left, 2.5 left. And Easton's clearly the best, and their business is excellent as well. So,
I mean, I think that what helped me do what I did is, frankly, growing up. Look, I grew up in Istanbul until I was 17. Then I lived in France until I was about 28. And then I came to the United States. So in my lifetime, I had an accelerated transition. Like, I lived 20, 30 years more of experiences in life. If you want, the Turkey, when I was growing up, was the Americas of the 40s, 50s. So I have been able to see, kind of an evolution of society and the cultures. And also in Turkey, food is very important. Families are important. Getting together is important. So the food is in France, south of France. And so all those things, inspired me about anchoring with food. It was the idea in Coconut Grove and a few other things, yeah.
So let's get to it a little bit. Stats are varied on this, of course, but generally speaking, approximately 500 malls have closed within the last few years. And yours is thriving. So could you explain to all these people that produce product for these malls the reason for that, or what you think the reason is?
And also, I mean, on the sign it says, "Is the mall is dead or not?" Kind of questions. But what I'm going to try to do is not to answer the question directly, but try to give you some background about why we are where we are right now. So that once you understand that background, and if you agree with what I'm saying, then you can figure out yourselves where the future has to be. I think that's more important than me just giving you, conclusions. But before I do that, I would like to take 5 minutes. Can you run the timer so I can watch what's going on? So but the important thing for everyone to understand that there is 2 kinds of shopping environments, 2 kinds of retail transactions. Need-based transactions and want-based transactions. That's very, very important in my thinking, in our company's thinking. Need-based transactions are the dollars come from everyone's budget. It's the first dollar. I mean, everybody has to spend in order to live. Want-based transactions are aspirational purchases. That is things you don't need. You get them because you want them. And what happens is the decision criteria for need-based transactions, the first ones, are almost brainy, intellectual. How many eggs can I get for $5? Or what is the cheapest milk? Or where do I get my underwear? And things like that. For want-based transaction, decisions are emotional, aspirational. They are not rational. They are a very different way of shopping. So that then creates, already you can imagine two different location criteria, right? Need-based, my grocery store is a need. There are shopping centers everywhere who provide need-based retail. But want-based retail is only what is left over after you take care of your needs, and it depends on the household's income about how much money they spend in those kind of uses. So want-based transactions, because they come from the available dollar for a, say, I don't want to use the wrong numbers here, but an $80,000 or $100,000 household, or maybe, they might spend $2,000 a year in aspirational. It can be a small vacation or going to the movies, once a month. But a $500,000 household can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on shopping. And their needs are very, very different. And so, so in a city, you will find that need-based environments are at every corner, in every neighborhood. Want transactions have to be in places that can accede from longer distances because you need to harvest money, aspirational money from bigger number of families from longer distances. And so that basically also the designs are different. I always joke, I say that in a need-based environment, and because of my accent, I can get away with the joke. In a need-based environment, a German architect is perfect. For a want-based environment, you need Italian or French architects. Basically because, one has to be efficient. One is, it's a choice I'm making to go there, and if it does not attract me, I'm not going to go there. Understanding these differences is very important, and the merchandising is different then, right? You understand that the grocery store sells need-based merchandise, and Louis Vuitton doesn't sell need-based merchandise because their bags, who cost $3,000, from a need standpoint, could be replaced by a free plastic bag you can get at the grocery store. So why get, it's an aspirational purchase. And obviously it's a different retailer. So what happens is, so that gave birth to two kind of environments. Let's go back in history, where was the want-based shopping? Typically downtown. That's the place who served the whole city's extra aspirational dollars, aspirational, and then the need-based dollars are served in the grocery stores closer to people's homes. That was, what was happening. The want-based shopping then moved from downtown to malls, but they were basically want-based, purchases. So, in summary, you get the point. A power center is a need-based environment. A grocery store anchored project is a need-based environment, and so forth. And the malls, and maybe Selfridges and things like that are want-based environments. Then the question is, okay, so, okay, I was going to stop now. Any questions on this before I go to why malls and downtowns? What happened there?
So this obviously affects tenant mix then.
Big
right.
time. Yeah,
Like,
it clearly...
You wouldn't have a grocery store right next to Louis Vuitton.
Yeah, you wouldn't, and instinctively you wouldn't, but I gave you the rational explanation why you wouldn't, because they are different things. In a, again, need-based environment, I want efficient parking. Remember, the German architect, efficient parking, clear lighting, easy in and out. In a want environment, I might walk a few minutes. I want flowers, and I want it to smell good, and I want it to be nice. And it's a very different approaches. So the question is then, so what happened to downtowns? Downtowns died, malls appeared, serving that customer. We are going back 1950s now. Southdale, maybe many of you know, one of the first malls created in America by an Austrian architect. And so what happened is, why did the downtowns die? There was no more money to spend, aspirational expenditures. Has nothing to do with that. The reasons of the malls, the downtown's death and the creation of malls has to do with about 4 or 5 things I'm going to give you. Number one, it's about Euclid, not the mathematician. I know you talked about stoicists earlier. So Euclid is a city in Ohio. And that city in Ohio, close to Cleveland, passed the first ever zoning ordinance in the United States in 1925. So they said, land uses, if you own a piece of land, you can only build homes on it, or only build industrial on it, or you can build only offices on it. It was sued. One of my colleagues at the time, Ambler Realty, went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, the city can do that, that the city can take your property rights away and restrict the use of land. So why is that important? Because remember, then we had the stock market crash in 28, 29. Then we had the Great Depression, 1930s. Then we went to war. So for about 20 years, in America, we built nothing. So all the zoning became legal. Nobody was doing anything with it anyway. So we come back from the war, and suddenly, we had 20 years of pent-up demand, plus the soldiers, we won the war. We need homes, we need offices, we need everything. So what are we going to do? Hire Pierre L'Enfant, the planner of Washington, D.C., or Olmsted, planner of Boston, big planner, and take 2 years and create a master plan for our cities? We had no time. And someone said, zoning, that's simple. We zone the cities, and then you go to Long Island and you create those residential neighborhoods, without worrying about planning and so forth. That was number one. So what happens is the single-use environments was created because of the Euclid and because of what happened after the war. The second thing that happened was the Eisenhower Freeway Act. As you know, Eisenhower was maybe you don't know, but he was the commander during the Second World War. I have to be careful when I say those things, but for me it's obvious because I was born in the 50s, but it might not be obvious to everyone. And Eisenhower, fought against the Germans. When he was young, he was a 23-year-old lieutenant in 1919, and he crossed the United States with a military convoy. It took him 3 months to go from the East Coast to the West Coast. Goes to Germany, fights with Hitler. The Panzer Division are using the Autobahns, who are everywhere. They can move everywhere. So they concluded in the 1950s in America that we better get our freeways, because if someone attacks us on the West Coast, how do you go from the right to the left? So the Freeway Act was created. So freeways, like the internet, is a military creation, actually. But what happened is when those freeways were created, they were supposed to go to loop roads around the cities. Well, federal free money, get the roads all the way to come to downtown. So suddenly it became very easy to leave downtown and to go to the suburbs, which we did not have before. Then FHA, third thing, Federal Housing Administration, after the war. If you are a military, you can buy a house putting 1% down. Barely a few $100, maybe $1,000. But so you could build a $40,000, $50,000 home with $100 or $200 down. If you want to remodel your kitchen close to downtown and you need to borrow just $2,000, there's no loans available. So, well, where do you think I'm going to go build my house? Instead of remodeling, I'm going to go to the suburbs and develop the suburbs. So that followed that. So that's another reason why we have this thing. And then final thing I'm going to mention, which is the GM streetcar conspiracy. I don't know if you have heard about this, but that was about 1935 to 1948 approximately, where General Motors, Firestone, tire makers, engine maker, car makers all got together, create a national transportation company, or anyway, some company, and they start buying the local streetcar companies, because their idea was that if they can get rid of the streetcars and replace them by cars, they would sell more tires, more things, etc. So they bought those companies, let them operate for a while, then convert them to buses, because the buses use engines and gas and cars and tires. And then slowly, they start shutting the streetcar systems down to encourage the consumptions into cars. So all those things, if you want, created the death of downtown and the creation of the suburban malls. Well, now you are telling me, but the malls are dying. So what is happening now? Well, first thing to understand is the mall's creation was not a natural urban planning consequence. It was the consequence of 4 unrelated events. Euclid with its zoning, and then Eisenhower, the freeways, and FHA with the housing administration rules and so forth, and the streetcar, etc. So why the downtowns, why the malls dying, and what's happening? So what happens for that, one thing I would say, I'm one of the early founding members of CNU, Council for New Urbanism. Young architects got together. You may know some of them. Andres Duaney is one of them. Peter Calthorpe from California is one of them, etc. This group of young architects and planners said, wait a minute. I mean, we cannot design our cities based on densities, 1 home per acre or this or that. We need to worry about the public spaces we are creating. We need to worry about what the street looks like, what the square looks like, what the public access to looks like. And the zoning is not a way of planning our cities. So they came with this and start, pushing, on that idea. And at that time also, remember, when they started in the 1980s, we had 100 million more residents in America, and we have half the downtowns left. So how come a country with 200 million goes to 300 million and the number of downtowns goes down by half? So we had a problem. So they kind of rubbed that problem in, and that created, projects like Easton, among others. The other thing which is very important to understand is the income distribution. That's a politically charged comment. After the Second World, I'm picking that from Thomas Piketty, who is a French economist who wrote a book called Capital in the 21st Century. I mean, you can buy it. I mean, don't buy the book. A third of it is footnotes. I mean, it's a PhD kind of paper. But you can buy a 20-page version of it that Amazon sells, where it summarizes the book. But anyway, so he made a study, and he showed in the United States, based on tax returns of Americans, between 1945 and 1980, 45 to 80, 35 years, the top 10% of Americans declared 30% of the total income declared to the IRS. And the bottom 90% of the Americans declared the remaining 70%. So top 10%, 30% of the income, bottom 90%, 70% of the income. In 1980, Reagan became president, but he's an actor, it's not his fault. There's a guy whose name is Laffer, an economist. But anyway, they came up with a new idea, supply-side economics. That is, the wealth is going to transfer by dropping down from the rich to the poor. So 1980 to 2015, another 35, symmetrical, going back, the income declared in 2015 by the top 10% of the Americans is now 50%. And the bottom 90% of the Americans declared the remaining 50%. So think about it. So discretionary income availability, right? If I'm on the top 1%, of which most of you might be, I mean, we're on top 5% for sure, it's not because we have more income that we buy 2 times more shirts or 2 times more shoes, 2 times more things. So consumption shrinks. And then the people who lived, I mean, our bottom 90% of the Americans used to be the people, living, I don't want to say paycheck to paycheck, but mostly spending all their money in retail and consumption. So what happened? During that period, Reagan 1980, I mean, to now, where the income distribution totally changed, what happened? We invented power centers. We invented outlet centers. We invented warehouse clubs. Gap invented Old Navy. So what happens is people still need their 3 pair of jeans, but instead of going to Gap, they went to get them cheaper at Old Navy, and then later they went to Costco, they could find them cheaper there. I mean, so that's what happened. So that means that the discretionary income significantly diminished. And that number still is true today, and maybe even getting worse. When Americans in general feel that whether they vote for Trump or they vote for Bernie Sanders, that something is not right, well, they are right. Something is not right. I mean, clearly, rich people, pay less taxes, keep most of the income, and so forth. And so that's another explanation now. So I wasn't living in the United States, but if I was here, I would say my mother used to put her makeup on, put her high heel shoes, go to the mall to buy things. That was a big deal. And today, I mean, things are changing, and that's why, because that was aspirational. For that generation, baby boomers and older, acquisition of goods, what was aspirational. To own things was aspirational. Because during the war, they were deprivations. They had to make up for them. So that was a good thing to do. So first, that money, available money, shrunk. So it was tough for the malls, to survive if less people are spending their money in them. And then more importantly also, another shift happened. I told you there were multiple reasons. The Council for New Urbanism, we need to create real places. Income distribution, there's not discretionary spending available to spend in a mall. A mall is not a grocery store, right? And the third thing was aspirations are changing. You know that maybe among the young people among you or our children, their aspirations are not ownership, it's the experience. I'm hearing many people say, my kid doesn't care about getting their driver's license or owning a car. I mean, they take Uber, it's probably cheaper, etc. that idea that we need function rather than ownership is also changing things. That's another reason also why malls are having problems. And the last thing I'm going to say is maybe controversial, but there is no REITs in this room, so I can say that. One of the biggest problems is REIT ownership of the malls. So why am I saying this? Think about it. Need-based environments, power centers, or grocery-anchored shopping centers. What is the role of the property manager or the person managing those things? Is to collect the rents, and if you are, and then put some reserve for capital expenditures, extremely predictable, and then distribute the profits to the partners. Same for home ownership, apartment ownership, for example. Now, look at the want-based environment. In the want-based environment, what do I need? We need to have retailers who are responsive to the changing needs of the customers. A grocery store can sell, one kind of cereal today, another kind of cereal tomorrow, but the grocery store is still functioning. But in want-based environments, product changes are much more important. I mean, I remember when I did Coco, my first project, having Gap and Banana was the key. And because of them, I was able to get Vicky's and do the rest of the project. I mean, today, Gap and Banana are not what makes you turn the page. Now, can I get Altered States? Can I, there are different tenants doing different things. So one of the things also in my opinion, causing the problem is REIT ownership, because in these environments, you need unpredictable capital expenditures all the time. You need to continuously invest capital. But what is a REIT, real estate investment trust? Distributes 80% of their income. And so you eliminate double taxation. But if you distribute the income, so investing capital is not something you want to do. I mean, when a retailer comes to a mall owner and says, look, you can give me $25, $50 allowance so I can maybe upgrade my store, and then I'll pay you 5, 10% more rent. So that's one option. And that happened to me recently. I'm not going to mention the tenants' names. And, $50 a square foot, get $300,000-$400,000, and then I get in our 10 years, and that tenant was with me for 20 years. So 20 years here, that's in our 10 years at Easton. We shut that tenant, and we put another tenant in who is costing me $250 a square foot, and whose rent, might be a few percentage points higher than the other one. We do that because we care about our sales. That means that we want to create merchants who deliver what the customer wants, and not to maximize the NOI of the asset. So you can see in the United States, forget Easton for a minute, but look at, for example, in California, Rick Caruso's projects, Americana or The Grove, or you go to Bellevue, Washington, that project, or you go to the Domain, Forbes Coin with their malls, even in Detroit or in Florida. I'm not saying that the REITs do not have successful malls. If you go to Roosevelt Field, there are places where there's monopoly, et cetera. It continues. But in general, if you kind of follow me, you will see that you will agree with me that the REIT format kills. It's like buying stock. If you buy a utility stock, you try to get distributions every year, 2-3% of your investment, and then you get it regularly. If you buy Apple stock, you're not counting on their distributions. They distribute peanuts. But the stock value will keep increasing. So a mall ownership, like in our pro forma, the value of our asset grows every year significantly. The return on the money we invest in the project is very significant, multiple tens of percent. And so the value of the asset grows, and that's the way we create our wealth. Like you create your wealth when you buy an Apple stock. But if you buy a utility stock, then you should buy REITs of grocery store anchored projects and things like that. So, that was kind of my explanation of what's happening. But you can think of them yourselves. What is the future? What do we need to do? We cannot modify the income distribution of Americans. This is a political debate. If people have more money, they will spend more money. If they don't have money, then they will not spend it. So that's not, we can touch much. So the question is, malls are discretionary spending environments. And many malls suffer because they transition more and more to a need-based environment a little bit, and that is not what a mall was designed for. By the way, another term I like to use for need-based environment, replenishment retail. When you keep replenishing, that's a replenishment retail. And by the way, Amazon is very powerful in that category. I mean, because if I'm going to buy toilet paper, I mean, I don't need to go to a store to get the toilet paper. But if I want to buy a Louis Vuitton bag, maybe I want to touch it, see it, and so forth. You can still get them online. I mean, if I'm a pen collector. My pens, I buy them online because I don't touch them. I know who does what, etc. So it depends what you are selling. So first, we need to understand what the customer's aspirations are. And if I look to the future, the aspirations I see, I mean, in the younger people, first, sustainability. I'm looking at, I have many college friends in France that I see regularly, and they are so much ahead of us in environmental concerns. I mean, there are people my age, in their 70s, and I mean, I see them talking to each other. Do you take the train or do you share the car? I mean, what's the carbon footprint? I try to organize a reunion of my friends here, so me going to France, carbon footprint of the flights. And I say, okay, I'll buy the carbon compensation. I mean, we don't have discussion among ourselves when we go visit someone. For them, it's part of their everyday life. There's no snobbery. It's not some young militant guy. I mean, it's part of their lives. I think it's coming here. We are 10 years behind, but always they end up coming here. So we have to be very conscious. At Easton, for example, I mean, I'm looking to be entirely renewable in the next 4 or 5 years, and we can use about 50,000 megawatts. So I mean, so see if we can do it entirely from renewable, things like that. But retailers too. I mean, Allbirds, I know there's someone from them here, but I mean, clearly, it's a renewable product. I don't think they took advantage of that aspect of their business, but I mean, it's clearly a product of that type. Or there's now a company, I think, Rotis or someone who takes, plastic bottles and makes shoes. I mean, so these kind of things are going to be real. The second thing is, environment. The second thing is, our society is becoming, we get into silos. We have less and less friends. I mean, even us. I mean, we live in silos. Everything is on the internet. Everything is connections. Young people don't have friends and relationships. So we need to create environments where the community is going to strive again, where people are going to touch each other. Certainly, serving food or venues of that type are very, very critical. But again, food also is the same way. There's need-based food, McDonald's, I mean, you need to feed. And there is want-based food. It's not a price point. I mean, you can go to an Irish bar, get a $6 beer. It's a want-based environment. So we need to create those want-based environments that are responsive to the younger people. And from an aspiration standpoint, everybody knows from goods to experience. But now we are moving to what I call learning experiences. So when, for example, Sur la Table does cooking classes, I mean, it's not only making your cake, but learning how to cook, learning something, or doing a vodka tasting, in a bar or something. I mean, there has to be something more than just the experience, that was cool, like zip line from one building to another. I think it has to go more than that. There has to be learning kind of things, I think. So these are, the things, and then those things have consequences. I mean, at Easton, you can see all the pictures we show you. We care about the environment. I mean, I use American architects, no Italian or French, but but it has a place where you feel good. I mean, every time someone out of town for the first time comes to Easton, the typical comment is, I had no idea there was such a place in Ohio. I mean, it's like, we are the country bumpkins, and so people are surprised. But, for 3 years in a row, the chain store gave us the first retail experience in the United States.
So the kind of 900-pound gorilla in the room, and you touched on it a little bit, is internet shopping. And the way customers shop, obviously, like you mentioned, is a lot different than before, and the expectations are really different. Like I can't tell you the number of times my wife just goes, I need some paper towels, they're gonna be here in a couple of hours, right? So that had to affect the malls as well, because I don't need to go to Abercrombie.
No, you are right. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned this. The impact of the internet, we have to be careful. I mean, there are significant amount of sales who are moving now to shopping, but the way they move around, they are a third. About a third of the online sales, I mean, the way the Commerce Department keeps their statistics, are things who have always been online before, mail ordered before. I mean, Sears used to have a catalog. You could buy medicine online. You could do a few things on catalogs. That is still counted in that category. The remaining 2/3, approximate 2/3, are half and half, between Amazon, Wayfair, et cetera, which are transactional environments. And then the other third is retailers. I mean, Target sells online, Walmart sells
Right.
online, et cetera, et cetera. So first, I mean, we need to become aware of that, what's happening. Then the impact of the online sales, and guys, I'm not the best expert on this. I'm sure there are people more competent than I am, but there are two different things. Need-based environment, the replenishment environments are very, very different than the want-based environments when it comes to the internet. I mean, the online purchases. And you can understand why. I mean, the toilet paper you can buy, online. But more importantly, what is the impact on brick and mortar? So let's take a grocery store. A grocery store is a combination of need and want. Typically you turn right. I mean, customers like to turn right. At Easton, we are very aware of that. So turns right, what do you see? You see the fruits laid out magnificently. You see the butcher. You see the pastries in the shelves. You see the breads, etc. Everything which is want related, that you have a choice. You can smell it, you can see it, you can touch it, wine tasting and so forth. So while you have not filled your tray yet, your cart yet, they put you into the want environment. So, it's empty, buy, you're not spending any money yet. And then you move to the other section with all the shelves, which is the warehouse section, where you pick things from the shelves and put them in your cart and you come out. So what happens is, what do you think the internet is going to impact the most? I hope you'll agree with me, it's going to be the warehouse section. Today, when we order online, we never go to I go to the grocery for a few things, but my wife, everything comes by someone who shops in the store. A shopper can pick about 30, 40 items an hour. Maybe 50, 60. A robot can pick 400 items an hour. So what is the grocery store of the future? In my opinion, it's going to be the want section, the fish and the meats and the things and the wines and the tasting accessible to the public. Your list of shopping in a machine, in the basement or above you, everything is stored, and then the robot picks everything out. When you are finished with your wants, you come out, you have all the need-based in front of you, and you walk out. So then the question becomes, is the need-based has to be distributed? Can Kroger have 3 central warehouses in Columbus and be able to satisfy the need-based shopping directly from their warehouses? And then has there to be a relationship between the need-based shopping coming from the warehouse and the want-based shopping that we are doing? I can buy my wants from Kroger and then my needs from a warehouse. So this is the change, in my opinion, that's going to happen. We are going to automate, organize, etc. And I think the cost, there's environmental issues as well. The truck coming and bringing you things back and forth, is that environmentally more efficient? But then, so that's need.
I've done a number of presentations where you look at a trend line for online sales and for footfalls, right? And a question I asked at NRF was, okay, your high school teacher would always say, just go ahead and plot out that trend line, this one going this way and this one going this way. You can see the writing on the wall. Kohl's, Macy's, you go through the whole list of this. So how would you explain that? That a lot of that has to do, I would think, with needs-based shopping, like you're saying, but also needs-based shopping in a much, much easier and much, much more convenient way.
Guys, you understand that my experience at Easton is not relevant to this. Now we are brainstorming and we can think together and everybody can have an opinion on this. In the future, the same question happened during COVID. Remember, we talked about ghost kitchens?
Yeah.
Do you really need, a physical pizzeria, Papa John's, to buy pizza from? Can we move them all in a ghost kitchen and everything can happen? Well, it bounced back, so there is something that doesn't work. I don't know, it's a brand recognition. I don't know what it is. I don't know. And if, in my opinion, this is very unusual because everybody gives the department stores for dead. But I believe, remember, when we had downtowns, department stores had hundreds of brands in them. Every brand did not have a store on the street. The malls are spread out department stores, where the department stores reduced their offerings and some of their merchandise went into the stores in the mall.
Yeah.
I think we are going to see a reversal, because the problem is, in a downtown, you can say, okay, Yaromir, downtowns are coming back, so why don't you do Easton downtown instead of mimicking one? Well, the problem is there are 100 owners. I look at that Santa Monica 3rd Street. I mean, everybody wants the jewelry store who pays $100 rent. Nobody wants the bookstore who pays $20 rent. Everybody wants the bar, who, again, nobody wants the restaurant. So, and then do you want the McDonald's or do you want Smith & Wollensky? I mean, so you need that global organization of the merchandising in a way that makes sense. In my opinion, what's going to happen, and I've been pushing that, but I have never done it yet, is talk to the city, and the city gives the land for free to a department store, provides the parking garages and everything, and the department store becomes like Selfridges, the old model, where the brands could present who they are. And then the streets around department store become, maybe a furniture store can happen separately or something like that, and mostly is the restaurants and bars and the clubs and the cinemas and the comedy clubs and things like that. That would be a good, maybe, combination, going forward. And it's not kicking yet, because unfortunately the only department store left where you can still speak to a guy whose name is on it is Dillard's. Everybody else is that. I mean, who am I going to speak at Macy's to sell that kind of idea? So it's difficult right now.
What about retailers? Like, what can retailers do? Do you think they should pick a lane?
For retail, no. For me, retailers, I mean, you need to combine. I mean, online and brick and mortar should be fully integrated. I mean, you cannot be one or the other. You have to be both. And then the two reasons why a store exists, because I'm seeing at Easton, I'm changing my language in my leases, because all the returns are negative sales on my store. That makes no sense. So what's happening is now the store has two roles, in my opinion. One is customer acquisition. If the store is in a good environment, you can acquire new customers and then show them the sense of service you have, how you deal with the customer, how you serve them, introducing your products, let them touch different kind of wools or cotton and things like that, teach them the difference. And the second area where the store is important is fixing problems, when there's a problem, right? I mean, because once I bought into a brand and I like the brand, I like the person there who taught me this, then I will buy online. I don't need to go back to the store if I know exactly the shirts or the sweaters I want or the jeans I want. But if I have a problem with something, oh my God, now to try to call an 800 number and try to explain them the problem I had and how to, or the wash doesn't fit the color or something is, etc. No, then the store is the salvage again. So for me, these are the two roles. I mean, and there are retailers in this room who know much more than I do, but these are the two things that should be absolutely enhanced. And the quality of the labor in the store is very, very important. Because if you turn your store in a distribution center, as I need a warehouse worker, I mean, you take it from the shelf, you want a red shirt, here it is, then don't have a store, do it online.
They're not department stores, but some big box stores are actually doing that. They're turning half their stores into distribution centers, and you can see it on the shelves as well.
I mean, this is the comment I made earlier. Should Kroger have 3 major warehouses in town or put them in back of their stores?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. These are logistics people should answer this, because, I mean, Target's model, distributed distribution, that's what they do, and that's most efficient for them. I think that the logistics have to organize what is the most effective way, I mean, to do those things. I mean, again, I'm not 100% expert, but in the grocery store I was telling you about, with the storage being upstairs or basement, you understand that you can have a truck delivering, can be emptied by robots. The shelves can be loaded by robots, and the pickup can be done by robots. So you eliminate the human interaction to the want-based environment where basically, I mean, the butcher asks what kind of steak you want and things like that. I mean, that's kind of the future. I don't know how many malls we'll have in America after all this. I have no idea, but I mean, that's...
Just one. Okay, we don't have a lot of time. Let me ask you this. Who do you think is really doing it out there? Who's really doing well? Malls and
malls,
stores.
No,
and you can compliment anybody. You can't diss anybody.
I mean, obviously I respect Rick Caruso a lot. He is very creative and so forth. But so I mean, what he has done is nice. And I mean, Forbes, the family, I mean, what they did, I like what they do. I mean, they're still only in the malls. I mean, I admire David Simon too, because 25, 30 years ago, when I told him the mall is dead, he told me, Yaromir, you might be right, but there's lots of money to be made out of the malls that exist. And he was right. He made billions of dollars where I made, millions. So, I hope he will be able to take the turn. I heard in Texas, the Hunt family is putting a fund together, $400 million range, to acquire dead malls, kind of, and reconvert them into community centers. Create them Easton-like feels, and mixing residential and other uses together. I think
Northland or City Center in Columbus.
Yeah.
Those are pretty places. So did you mention retailers? Did I miss that?
I mean, guys, I cannot do that. No, Victoria's Secret is very good.
Well, and anything else you'd like to add? Any other thoughts about?
I mean, there's so much to talk about, too many things to discuss. And I'm sure that I'm not giving you a kind of a conclusion, this is right, this is wrong. But I mean, from what I said, I hope maybe your ideas is changing a little bit. We never thought of it that way. I mean, that's all I'm trying to do. I mean, because you have enough experience here to figure it out, or what has to happen here.
Yeah. I just did a talk at the NRF, and I think we've almost lost the art of like store design and visual merchandising and great associates and just the vibe and the fun, like you're saying, like the fun of the store. And we've become functional just like the website. So if you want to be functional, you go to the website and then all of a sudden you go to a store, it's the same thing. Well, it's fast checkout, it's fast this, it's fast that. No, you want to spend time in a store, right? And I think that's where restaurants have, now I'm pontificating, but I think restaurants have an advantage because they have all three of those. They have environments, they have products, they have services, and you just can't get that stuff anywhere else.
I mean, you are right. If you can attract the people to an area for that interaction, at Easton I have train running, so 5-year-old love them, drags their mother to look at the train. When they become 15-year-old, they take their first date, and then when they become 21-year-old or 18 with false IDs, they start drinking, they go to the bars. And then, when they are, like my age, they take my wife for our anniversary. I mean, so that's what makes us come. Then obviously, then retailers are around us, and that's where we shop. That's I think the future.
One thing you guys have, last thing, I guess one of the things you guys have always been masters at is the tenant mix. I think which really makes a difference, because then you can have a store that is pretty functional and maybe slightly boring next to a really great coffee shop and a really great restaurant and a park, a place to sit and all that. It makes that one kind of dud a lot better.
You can see from the pictures you are seeing right now, and clearly we pay attention to architecture, the way we design them. Some buildings look like 4 buildings. Actually, they are 1 building. They were just mimicking something. What I would like to say for merchandising, go back to my Turkish roots. I grew up in Istanbul, where there's a Grand Bazaar built in the 1500s. And so it has been there, still operates. And when I was a kid, my parents would take me there, going to school, shopping. Before we go to school, we need shoes and a bag, etc. And the Grand Bazaar was always organized by merchandise type. You were the jeweler's corner, the leather corner, the carpets, the clothes, the shirts, etc. So that impacted me in the way we merchandise. If you look at Easton, you will see we have kind of a certain youth person in one area, then it's another area. The restaurant matched the customer, and if you want Smith & Wollensky or Mastro's are across Louis Vuitton, so I try to organize. So we don't merchandise blindly. You cannot just go anywhere and get, because there's a vacant space, you put a tenant there. We still merchandise by target audience.
All right, everybody. Yaromir Steiner.
Thank you.
Thank you.